I got some really bad news for the people in Sarasota and Bradenton about the red tide. If there's one thing that I've learned about this disastrous situation is that once you get one really strong bloom of the red tide, it doesn't seem to go away. It just kind of seems to linger on year after year, just like it did in Naples and Fort Myers, always making you sick. One of the reasons why I moved out of Naples, the red tide never seemed to go away. Boy, I hope that doesn't become the scenario for us here up in Sarasota and Bradenton, because that right there would be the final straw for me with my health and my sensibility to the red tide. Let's get into today's video. Let's get into this.
14.
Bradenton, respond on task 4.
The red tide has officially arrived to Sarasota and Bradenton, with high concentrations in southern Sarasota and noticeable concentrations in Bradenton. But even before FWC told you guys about this through their daily sample map, you guys already knew it because I told you because I got sick. You could probably tell from my voice. My throat is itchy, it hurts, my sinuses hurt, I have what feels to be somewhat like a fever, and of course the coughing is relentless. I first noticed the red tide in Nokomis Beach 3 days ago where there were dead fish everywhere. We uploaded a video of that to our YouTube channel. We had strong winds out of the south that brought some spurs from that bloom all the way down in Fort Myers to our area. I could smell it. I got sick immediately. I'm very sensitive to the red tide. Today, February 15th in Bradenton, Florida, I was driving people towards the beach. As soon as we got close to the water, my passenger started to cough. And I had one person who I picked up at the beach. By the time they got back to Lakewood Ranch, they were in a very bad state, coughing. Their face was red. Their nose was dripping everywhere. And this passenger almost went through a medical episode in the backseat of the Uber, which just goes to show that a lot of people are going to the beach and not even aware of the danger if they have a sensibility to the red tide. This particular passenger, which had a really bad reaction, didn't even know that the red tide was a thing. They didn't know what it was. You can tell from my voice right now how bad I am. And many of my Uber passengers that I'm getting are just completely unaware of why they got so sick while they were on the beach. I've also had a lot of people in the comments section saying that I'm lying, that there's no red tide, that they've been out fishing and everything's great. Look, you personally may not be affected by the red tide and you may not be seeing dead fish where you are, but that doesn't mean that half a mile down the road it isn't different. That's why there's samples at different points. You could have high concentrations in one place and a mile down the road have no present sample. So that's the way the red tide works. It's an algae bloom, so you can have it going crazy in one spot and somewhere else not be present. So the individuals who are telling me that I'm lying, that there's no red tide, there's literally a video of me playing with dead fish in Nokomis Beach wearing gloves. I wore gloves this time. No, I didn't stage hundreds of dead fish on the beach, and I didn't pay hundreds of actors to cough in the background. Red tide is present. I confirmed it with the Nokomis Beach video. We confirmed it with the fact that there's a huge algae bloom in Cape Coral, Fort Myers area. We had strong south winds. People are getting sick. If you listen to police radio, you'll hear people along the beach calling for medical help because for some individuals, it can actually lead them to the emergency room, while other individuals will have absolutely no reaction to it. Now, I'm not a scientist and I don't know how this crap works, but I believe with the fact that we had 20 to 30 mile per hour sustained winds out of the south, that it's actually airborne and it's actually in the air, not in the water. So you may not be seeing dead fish, but if you're a human and you're breathing in that air, you're going to get really sick. I've noticed a lot of people are really sick, and I got really sick, and some of my Uber passengers got really sick. So people are getting sick along the beach. Now, 2 passengers, one was almost ready to go to the hospital. The other one was normal. So don't assume because you haven't seen any dead fish and you feel good that other people are not going to get sick. For me, the first symptom is lightheadedness, dizziness, kind of like a brain fog, and then I feel like a lot of sinus pressure. That's the way it onsets with me. And this girl that was in the back seat had the same exact reaction that I had, which is basically your sinuses start to hurt, you start to cough and sneeze, face turn red, eyes turn red, a lot of sinus congestion. So this girl had probably the same reaction that I would have had. So this girl was really freaking sick. But not only was she sick after I picked her up right here at the beach, But if you see that, that's a fire truck. There were other people there who were sick as well. So it seems like there's very high concentration in the air, not in the water samples, because we had a very strong sustained wind out of the south, where one of the largest blooms of freaking red tide that's ever existed is at right now. It's crazy that people are sitting here and arguing with me that the red tide isn't here in this area because they haven't seen it and they feel great and they've been on the water all day. When I'm having Uber passengers that are sick, I'm personally very sick. I've been sick for 3 days, and I'd upload a freaking video holding dead fish in Nokomis Beach. And you have the FWC website that also shows you that it's starting to bloom in this area. But before the daily samples came out, I was already telling you guys I'm sick. We have red tide because I grew up in Naples, Florida. It's not my first rodeo with the red tide. But overall, these people here in Sarasota and Bradenton, bless their hearts. They've never seen a hurricane. They've never seen a red tide. They're very, amateur level Floridians because they've never been through all this crap. And you try to tell them and warn them, hey, this is the way this goes. This is the way that go, because they're amateur Floridians that have been spared for 100 years. And here they are not listening despite the fact you're telling them this is how this crap goes. But despite the fact there's red tide, it took nearly 45 minutes just to get through traffic to get to the beach. And it took, well, a good 30 minutes to get off the island. And this was early in the day. I wouldn't imagine how hard it would have been to get off the island during peak hours. So there are people going to the beach. And in fact, myself, I like to work along the beach. I like the blue skies. I like the color of the water. But this crap is making me dearly sick. And really, if you're going to make money on Uber, you're going to make it along the coast with tourists, which means that I've been venturing close to the water, even though I know I shouldn't be anywhere near the water. The further inland you go, the better it gets. But I'll tell you that this morning in Lakewood Ranch, when I walked outside of my house far inland, I could literally smell the red tide in the morning because the wind was blowing out of that direction. And the windy app shows that the winds are still coming out of that direction, which means we're going to continue to get the spurs from the red tide. And it's going to continue to make people sick. And eventually, we're going to see the fish die here in this part of Florida. It's a mess that's about to unfold. How long does the red tide last? Well, in a good scenario, it could just disappear just as quick as it came. But in a worst case scenario, it could spread all over the waterways. And we can have high levels along the entire coast. And at that point, we would have a massive fish kill in the Sarasota Bradenton area. Could last weeks. I've seen it last as much as months. We just don't know what it's going to do, and the only thing we can do now is wait and watch the daily sample maps daily. This has been the worst tourist season we've ever had. This week, with the winds out of the south, we finally got a warm up. We finally got some beautiful blue skies. Finally, people are starting to go back to the beach. Valentine's Day is over. That's another huge event that brings people back to Florida, and here we are now with the red tide growing in our area, and a lot of people unaware of the medical complications that can come from being near the water. And like I said, some people don't even notice it. Other people end up in the emergency room. Everybody's tolerance is different. For me, cough drops and drinking a lot of water has helped, as well as taking this vapor rub thing that you spray into your throat. That's kind of like gonna numb it all. So, yeah, people are flooding the beaches in large numbers. You can see all the cars packed, ready to go to the beach. The tourists are finally here, and it couldn't be a worse time for the red tide to go out of control. If you guys remember, when we had the hurricanes, I did a video on Siesta Key where I showed you guys that they turned the water back on before the electricity. Now, the sewer pumps work off electricity. So if you turn the water back on, but you don't turn the electricity, well, the sewage backs up into the streets. I actually did it during a live stream where you can see the sewages in Siesta Key overflowing into the streets. And I told you guys, give it 3 or 4 months, you're going to see red tide. And sure enough, my prediction and the timing that I gave it came true. A lot of people called me crazy. A lot of people say I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no idea. You're not a scientist. This guy drives for Uber. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You can say all you want. But if you find that live stream from after the hurricane, you'll see exactly that my prediction and the time frame that I set for it to happen came true. Because after hurricane, which one do I want to go for? Ian, I saw it. Irma, I saw it. Let's say Irma, because I've been through more than one hurricane. After Hurricane Irma in Naples, Florida, Imperial Gulf Coast, Gulf Estates down there, they opened up the same thing. They opened up the water, but they didn't put the power. It overflowed, and what do we know? Next thing we knew, we had red tide in Wiggins Pass. So this isn't like rocket science. This is real life experience. This isn't my first rodeo. I'm telling these people here in Sarasota and Bradenton what time it is, but they're so entitled, they're so snobby, they are so hard-headed that they can't listen to anyone. But sure enough, just like I said, you're now seeing the daily sample maps increase, and some areas of the Sarasota area now have high levels of red tide. This is experience, time-tested knowledge. I don't give a crap what you think because you are an amateur at Florida. You don't know about this crap. This is your first hurricane. It's your first rodeo, buddy. You don't know what you're talking about. By now, if you've been watching my YouTube channel for a while, you could probably count with your fingers how many times I told you the way something was going to play out, and that's exactly the way it plays out. The real reason you have red tide, if you have water but you don't have electricity, which happened in many places, you may recall my recent upload from Siesta Key. On that video, you can see a city sewage storm drain. You have water flowing into the system, but you don't have pumps to move it out. It overflows into the streets. It causes red tide immediately. So this is me 3 months ago telling you that we were going to get a huge red tide bloom because of this hurricane. As our peak tourist season finally starts to come around the corner, for us to have this red tide situation is absolutely fatal for our area, and it's possibly the last thing we needed right now. So if you're planning on being anywhere on the west coast of Florida, before you travel over here, keep an eye on the FWC daily sample map and try to have an idea what's happening with the red tide. Sometimes a beach a few minutes away will not be affected at all, which means you can keep your same hotel and airline destinations. Just change the particular beach you're going to go to. If you notice that the smell of dead fish is making you sick, get away from the water immediately because the effects can last for days or even weeks. This is just another hurricane aftermath that we're still dealing with. There's still hurricane destruction visible all over the islands. For the most part, it looks beautiful and great out there, and it's very enjoyable. We had one really nice day before it got windy and the algae bloom reached us. That was one beautiful day, but unfortunately, for the rest of the year, it's uncertain how bad this situation will last. In my personal experience, once I come into contact with red tide, I can be sick for days or weeks. So if you're very sensitive or you have asthma, it's not even worth the risk.